Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So starting off of course with the boxing news, and Sandstrom will fight Lescurat April 24th. The EBU have ordered McCann versus Baluta 2. Zepeda is in talks to fight Cabrera. Cully versus Patera. Bisoli and Lillard will fight May 25th. Azim is set to fight to Eubank, and he's also vacated his EBU title pretty much in the process, and seems like he's not ready yet to fight Dalton Smith. Will we ever see that fight happen? Well, I don't know. I think the Eubank fight is still a good fight, still an entertaining fight. Is it exactly what the fans want? Don't know, but either way, like I mentioned, still a good fight, and it's just going to be interesting to see what route Dalton Smith's able to go down now, and if that's more of a world route, and maybe he doesn't look back and even think about Adam Mazim anymore. Maybe he moves on from that and goes on to better things, and maybe this time has passed. Maybe we might never see this fight. We'll have to wait and see. Riakporhe is set to rematch Willem Smith at June 15th. Noakes will fight Mendy April 20th. Navarrete vs Barincic. Santillan vs Norman Jr. Torres Jr. Vargas, Garcia, Barrera Jr., Sheehy, Lopez and Mansur will fight May 18th. Always great to see Navarrete fighting. Obviously it's not the rematch with Conceição, but nonetheless Barincic is a fighter who's built himself and has now made a bit of a name for himself, and has been mentioned around a few fights in the past, and now is getting this big opportunity, and we'll be interested to see how he deals with it. And the Santillan fight, I mean, I got his prediction right when he fought Rocha. I thought he'd be able to go out there and cause the upset and do it, and he did, and he looked very impressive in the process. And for him to be able to go out there and now be fighting again on a big card again, it's what you want to see, and it's great to see. Ramirez is set to fight Jimenez April 20th. Nonchinga is in talks to fight Gonzalez. Azim vacates the EBU title, like I mentioned. Paul vs Titan is now officially being classed as an exhibition fight, yet again highlighting the fact that it's a pointless fight that doesn't really need to happen. Commission, one of the state commissions have ruled out Fundora until September, so there was talks of him being made mandatory for a Crawford fight or a Spence fight, but that's now been pretty much chalked out until at least September now, and even at that point the whole division could have changed by then, so it looks like for the moment we're not going to be seeing Fundora in any huge matchups for a little bit. Barboza Jr. is set to fight McComb April 20th. Chisora has offered to fight Joyce, which I feel like I mentioned back when Joyce beat Ali. I thought that would be a fight which would make sense, Chisora versus Joyce, and now we might possibly being able to be seeing it, and it's an entertaining one for me. I think there's not really too much left for Chisora to offer, but I'm not entirely sure how much there's left for Joyce to offer, and I think that fight will definitely answer them questions. Crawford could fight Kelly next. That's a huge fight for Josh Kelly. It's a fight which nobody's really seen coming, but when you look at the WBO rankings, and I suppose it makes sense to an extent. Obviously, it's unlikely that it will happen, but it's not completely out of the realms of possibility, but it's one of them cases where you see the British fighter coming in as such a huge underdog against such a dominant American champion, and 9 times out of 10 it normally goes in the American fighter's way. Berry has joined GBM Sports. Great to see Niall Berry getting that exposure with them. Davis vs Martin and Benavides vs Vosdick are set to fight June 22nd. A great card, like I said. PBC are really stacking up these cards now since joining Amazon Prime, and that's what you want to see, really. Collazo is open to fight in Jerusalem again, trying to go undisputed, and I don't blame him, to be completely honest, Collazo. Maya is set to rematch Jonas June 15th. Olaskuga is in talks to fight Kano. Brown vs Ihayo. Pelu vs Goodall and Kataya vs Bolotniks will fight May 11th. Bentley vs Dignam. Grandal vs Collins and Garner vs Dillon will fight May 11th. Delgado has re-signed with Top Rank. Wardley vs Clark 2 is targeted for September. McGrail will fight Leach April 27th. Sheehy is set to fight James May 18th. Perez will fight Motley April 26th. Joshua said he wants to retire at 37, so he's basically said that he wants 2 more years left of fighting and he wants to retire, which is valid. Will we see him actually retire at 2 years? We'll have to wait and see where he is in 2 years, and it's the same thing that you've seen with Tyson Fury, really. I mean, Tyson has said that he's wanted to retire. He's officially retired at one point, but doesn't actually mean that he is, he then came back, and so retiring in boxing now doesn't necessarily mean loads, because a lot of fighters now have retired and then come back or gone to do exhibitions or whatever, so it doesn't exactly mean loads, but within them 2 years there's a lot of options and a lot of routes he can go down, and we'll have to wait and see what them routes are. Kovalev versus Safar, Chamberlain versus Wahab, Lapine versus Pudivitir, Atoma versus Mezenchev, Nikia versus Seitz, Lowe versus Ahmedi will fight May 18th. Ioka is set to fight Martinez in July. Butler will fight Jimenez May 11th. Robinson won via unanimous decision versus Petifa. Corners won via unanimous decision versus Brown. Rocha won via KO in round 2 versus McKernan. Swan won via unanimous decision versus Thomas. Lepai Jr. won via majority decision versus Angeli. Brubaker won via unanimous decision versus Gio. Vorobev drew versus Kappa. Camarelli won via TK round 5 versus Pavlidis. England won via split decision versus Herring to become WBO Global Super Featherweight Champion. Sanchez won via unanimous decision versus Ruiz. Sal Divar won via unanimous decision versus Rivera. Flores won via KO in round 1 versus Espinoza. Garcia won via split decision versus Alguin. Flores won via KO in round 2 versus Guevara. Ramos is set to fight Salgado May 4th. Chelly is set to fight Simpson next. Hearn wants Cruz versus Matias. I think that's a great fight. I really hope that fight gets made. Obviously, Matias is, been gone. He's basically gone from a fighter who's been overlooked by everybody, underrated by everybody, and not really had anybody that wants to fight him, to, as of recent, a lot of fighters have been calling him out. A lot of fighters have been actually seemingly, I don't know if they actually want to take him, but they've actually taken his name seriously, and it's good to see. I feel like that comes with the added platform of when you join Matchroom, that's something that's going to happen, but obviously he has to get through the Paro fight first, and that's a really tough fight, and that's a fight which he definitely shouldn't or can't be afforded to overlook. Promnik won via KO in round 3 versus Duma. Drew versus Mabata. Presser won via unanimous decision versus Ramaliba. Tice won via split decision versus Razu. Potija won via KO in round 11 versus Gomez to become South African heavyweight champion. Malajika won via unanimous decision versus Braithwaite to remain IBO World Super Flyweight Champion. I was going to do a prediction for that, I probably should have, but I completely forgot, to be completely honest. That's my bad, but he did completely outbox Malajika and showed that kind of world-class level difference between the two fighters. Mercado won via TK in round 4 versus Berrio. Tonishev won via KO in round 1 versus Oligliari. Tessari won via points versus Jovanovic. Mustafaj won via points versus Petrovic. Licata won via KO in round 7 versus Sejrdinovic. Sawa won via unanimous decision versus Barker Porter to become EBU Silver Lightweight Champion. Sad to see for Barker Porter, somebody we've had on the channel a little while ago now, but it's good to see her getting these big opportunities, and it was very much a deserved opportunity, but it was sad to see that she couldn't get the result to go her way. I felt like there are still going to be big fights in the women's division for her, but we'll have to wait and see how she kind of can rebuild from this. Moving on. Medeiros won via TK round 4 versus Vicente. Navarro won via TK round 6 versus Lopez. Pacheco won via unanimous decision versus McCallum to remain WBC USA and WBO International Super Middleweight Champion. Yafai won via TK round 8 versus Gauto to remain WBC International Flyweight Champion. Castro won via unanimous decision versus Montoya to become WBC Continental American Super Featherweight Champion. Nicholson won via unanimous decision versus Mahfoud to become WBC World Featherweight Champion. Hitchins won via unanimous decision versus Lemos. And to speak about that card, which was arguably the biggest card of the week, boxing wise or in general combat sports wise, it wasn't the overly stacked week, but this was definitely the best card out there. And so we'll start with the Pacheco fight. it was a close fight. I mean, to be fair to McCalman, he came in and jabbed quite well and managed to be quite composed in the early rounds and did pick off some early rounds, and it made throughout the whole fight Pacheco work harder. Pacheco definitely made adjustments, and he didn't really necessarily get to really work what he wanted to do. But when you have to make adjustments and be in a fight which was scrappy at times, and McCalman was really kind of holding a lot and not really letting Pacheco do a lot of his work and trying to make it difficult and tried to make it close, which it was relatively close in the end. Pacheco did well to be able to get through it and to still be able to improve, and by the end of it he was timing his shots nicer and he was landing a bit cleaner when he was in between the clinches of McCalman. But it was a bit of a messier fight. Not necessarily what you want to see, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either for a fighter who is building himself at a world level. Moving on, your thigh. That was an interesting performance as well. It wasn't anything crazy. I feel like he definitely could have got Galto out of there earlier, and it would have been something that you probably would have wanted to see. Like I say, it wasn't anything spectacular from him. It was still relatively clean boxing a lot of it, and he was using his quick hands, his nice sharp shots a lot of the times, but he wasn't really setting off his jab quite as much as I would have wanted. He was getting caught with a lot of shots, he was getting damage to the body and wasn't moving as well as what he often can do, and sometimes he will just necessarily just stand in your face and just wait. And so attacking wise, there's a lot of good things there, and it is nice to see, but it's just always a lot of the time the defensive wise with Yafai, which I'm always not too sure about. And he's progressing gradually, but I'm not entirely sure how far he can progress, and we'll have to wait and see. I don't feel like he's nowhere near, in my opinion, ready for that of like a Sonny Edwards or anybody like that has been possible talks around him. But for the moment, he's progressing, he's getting there. I feel like it's been an interesting card this week. This one, it was a card full of fights fights which weren't spectacular but were good enough, like the Pacheco one, Yafai one, not necessarily the Nicholson one, but the Hitchins one. Like, they're all close fights and they weren't really standouts for any kind of stars or anything like that. And when you are matchroom boxing and when you're in America and you're on a big show, you want to see more, clearer winning performances. But Nicholson, I think she offered that. I got the prediction right for what I said, and she put out a good performance. Obviously, it wasn't anything, in my opinion, spectacular. I think she is improving with her fights. She's looking a bit cleaner when she's letting her hands go, and there is looking like there's a little bit more power there when she times her shots nicer, but still a little bit messy at times when she wants to actually let her hands go. She didn't let her hands go much. She stuck behind her jab a lot, which I respect, and she kept her range there. A lot of people were slating her performance and saying it was boring and whatsoever, but she did what she had to do. Mahfood was going to come in and be an interesting entity in the inside and try and make it messy and try and drag you into a fight, and Nicholson wasn't really wanting to do that, and she didn't really do that at all. And so I respect that element of the game plan. She's a good boxer, she's a clear boxer, she's an amateur type style to an extent, but still quite point scoring type style, and you can still see that there is a gulf in class between her and Serrano, I believe, and I think her versus Chapman is the fight that needs to be made next, and it seems like it might be in like September time, so hopefully it is, because that is a great fight to make. And then to speak about the Hitchins fight, that was mad. The judge who gave, I believe, 117 to 111 is a criminal scorecard. Lemos put on a good valiant effort. He came on early with a very good pressure, really caught Hitchins off guard. Got my prediction bang on for this one as well. I got the one I said Pacheco would go to points. I said Nicholson would go to points, and I said Hitchins would go to points, but it'd be a split decision and it'd be a really close fight. And I mean, it realistically could have been / should have been a split decision. It was a really close fight, and Lemos, like I said, really came on early, nice, put that relentless pressure on, and then dropped off a little bit, and Hitchins picked up a bit going into the middle rounds, and actually started being able to box well when Lemos wasn't just in his face, and then he was looking good. But when Lemos put it back on him again, come the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th round, Hitchins didn't really seem to want it, really struggled to keep him off, wasn't moving as nice, and all the things I did kind of expect and did see coming. And when you're against somebody who's, of course, undefeated, and that South American type style, which is going to be very much in your face and just very compact, hard to deal with. It's what every fighter has to deal with at some point to be able to get to a world level and to be able to get at a world championship level. Hitchins dealt with it not amazingly, and like I say, 117 to 111 on a scorecard isn't, in my opinion, anywhere close. I think it was a close fight. There's an argument possibly that you can make for Hitchins to win on a split decision, but like I say, some of the scorecards as of recent, I mean, in general, in boxing, scorecards aren't always, what you expect. I never call robbery or anything like that because you fight a fight, it happens, the result happens, whatever it happens, and there's very few fights which I feel like are clear, outright robberies, and I wouldn't say this was, but it was a close fight, and like I say, one scorecard, that one in particular, was one which I wasn't really too fond on. Wall won by unanimous decision versus Bono. Avidic won by majority decision versus Rodriguez. Kakiki won via KO in round 4 versus Gonzalez. Aliha won by unanimous decision versus Sek to become IBF International Middleweight Champion. Lima won by stoppage in round 10 versus Matevosian to remain IBF Intercontinental Super Welterweight Champion. And Mutazaliev won via KO in round 11 versus Kulke to become IBF World Super Welterweight Champion. And by the end of that fight, I couldn't manage to to be able to watch the whole fight. I couldn't really seem to actually be able to find the full fight or highlights or anything like that anyway, but I managed to see the stoppage, and it looked messy at the end. They both looked knackered. There wasn't really much technique going into either of the fighters' punches. I think Kulke's age really showed, but I think Mutazaliev's ability showed a little bit. Like, he looked very poor come to the end, and obviously he managed to get the late stoppage, and it was an impressive knockout, but it was just a little bit of a slugfest come the end, and yeah, it was a bit messy. I said that Mutazaliev would be able to stop him. I think I also said late as well. I've had a good week for predictions, but yeah, it wasn't amazing. It's not setting the division on fire. There was talks to him possibly going on and fighting Spence Jr. and after this one, and I wouldn't even hate that fight. I think Spence Jr. coming off the loss could come and get a win here against Mutazaliev. I think there's a fight there to be made, but it's just not necessarily. I'm not seeing loads of good from that stoppage alone from Mutazaliev. And Serrano is set to rematch Taylor June 8th in the Saphir in Vegas, which would be a huge fight. It kind of come out of nowhere, that announcement, but yeah, no, that would be a huge event. The first ever combat event to be in there, and yeah, it's kind of come by surprise a little bit. Moving on now to the MMA news. Marshall will fight June 8th. Marshall's first fight in PFL MMA. We'll have to wait and see how she does. Nicolau will fight Perez April 27th. Knoll won via KO in round 2 versus Dixon. Almeida won via KO in round 2 versus Budka. Matsumoto won via submission round 2 versus Argueta. Hugo won via decision versus Falcao. Dumont won via decision versus Radami. Rezeki won via decision versus Walker. Morona won via decision versus McGee. Campbell won via decision versus Peck. Bahamondes won via KO in round 1 versus Kiargos. Marisco won via decision versus Charrier. Jackson won via decision versus Hernandez. Allen won via decision versus Curtis. And in general, another decent UFC fight night. Nothing crazy or anything like that. Pretty much had what you always expect from a UFC fight night, being that of a big knockout, and then also a big decision fight, which was like just a really good scrap. The big knockout being the Bahamondes one, which was, I mean, he was a big guy and he managed to get a big, impressive kick stoppage, and it struck it right to his head and timed it perfectly. It was beautiful to watch it. And the Mariscal Charrier fight was a great back and forth fight. Two fighters that just have a lot of will and a lot of desire, and a lot of the time, I've spoke about this before, the UFC, I always enjoy how they do put fights together, sometimes with two fighters that aren't exactly on the best of runs or anything like that, but they're just always up for a good fight, and that's what you just love to see. It's not exactly always just a genuine just getting battered all the time or anything like that, which you often see in boxing. It's like two equal level fighters fighting each other, and that's what you want to see. And the Allen and Curtis fight was a great fight as well. Allen probably had the better variety of strikes, and I mean, Curtis was boxing him a lot of the time and was hurting him quite a lot, but Allen, he did what he had to do. Even when he was hurt, he went to the ground when necessary and utilised different aspects in his game when needed, and even got Curtis nearly hurt at the end. And in the end, it made for an entertaining fight, and a fight which two fighters which you know, aren't top level in the middleweight division or anything like that, but nonetheless, they're going to put on an entertaining display, and they did that indeed. And yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.